My name is Lucy Craig, and this is my husband,
Gordon Best.
And this is the second time we've done this introduction, because the first time we left our radio on and none of us noticed, and then nobody could hear it. So we're starting again. And the first thing I want to say is that we're going to be showing you the changes we've made in our house. But we're under no illusions that this environmental crisis that we're all living through is not going to be changed by any of us as individuals doing anything. It's going to take governments changing things, multinational corporations changing their ways, and fossil fuel industries no longer being fossil fuel industries. But nevertheless, we can all do a little bit. We can give up flying, as we've done. We can make the biggest personal changes in our lives that anybody can do, which is to decide how many children they have, because that's the biggest carbon footprint thing that, what's the word I want? That will make bigger difference to your carbon footprint than anything else you do, choosing how many children you have. We're a bit old to decide on that now. But in the meantime, you can do things in your house. You can do cheap and cheerful things like making sure your letterbox is well insulated. Many letterboxes aren't. Or you could do some of the much more expensive things that we had an opportunity to do when we downsized from a big old Edwardian house to this house built in 1984. Do you want to list some of the things? Oh, well, we're doing it partly because we belong to Muswell Hill Sustainability Group, which is a very active group and gives lots of advice to people about how to cut their carbon footprint. We also, do you want to mention this and this?
Well, this is something we hand out when people come to visit the house, which they do twice a year. We used to be part of something called the Super Homes Network, which is now defunct, but we now belong to the Muswell Hill Sustainability Group. And they arrange visits to people to come and see what we've done. And the main thing, when we moved here, we thought the house was a bit small. And so we arranged to have the rear wall moved out 2 meters. And that was such a major piece of construction that we took the opportunity to change the house in all the basics. We stripped out all the wall insulation, we stripped out the ceilings and the floors, and we replaced them. We put better insulation in all the walls. We put underfloor heating embedded in screed in a block below the floor to provide heating, and we insulated the top of the house as well. And in addition, we installed 2 air source heat pumps. One is outside, and that provides the underfloor heating, and one is inside, and that provides us with all our hot water, so we don't have a boiler. And much of this is powered by 16 solar panels, which we have on the roof, which also feeds a power point in the driveway where we charge our electric car. And we got those solar panels put in before the government phased out the subsidy. So we get now nearly £2,000 a year in payments from the solar panels, which more or less offsets the cost of our electricity and gas. In addition, we put in argon-filled double glazing in all of the windows. We put in LED light bulbs, 64 light bulbs replaced with LEDs, and we've been here now for 9 years, and we only replaced 1 above the 64 bulbs. We put in a boiling water tap so that we don't have to make use of a kettle. So not only do we not have a boiler, we don't have a kettle. And we live here, in terms of the utilities, practically for nothing.
That's partly because the only gas that we have in the house is for our gas hob in the kitchen. And so our gas bill is like £4 or £5 a month. And that's the only gas we have.
The other thing we did is we put in a wood stove. And that's because in the winter, particularly during January and February, it's sometimes difficult to get the underfloor heating to provide heating. It takes a long time to change the temperature because the whole block below the floor is heated up. And if you want to let that slow down or you want to speed it up, it takes hours, not minutes. And so if it gets a bit chilly, we just use the wood-fired stove.
We also, so our carbon footprint is very low. We use very, very little gas, and our energy supplier is Good Energy, which, whilst it is slightly more expensive than other energy providers, has 100%, uses 100% renewables. And so what with our solar panels and getting our electricity and gas through good energy, it enables us to live comfortably in our minds, knowing that we're using very little of the fossil fuels that should be staying in the ground.
And one other thing that's really worth mentioning is that we had something called a thermographic survey carried out. And that involved someone coming here at night, when it was just a cold night, putting a great big cover over our front door with a fan which sucked air out of the house, creating a semi-vacuum. And he then went around with his thermographic camera and took pictures of where the cold air was coming into the house. And at the end of it, he said that even though there were very big cracks or crevices or leaks, collectively they were like having a football-sized hole in the side of the house. But the reason it's worth mentioning is it isn't outrageously expensive. I think we paid something like £400. And most importantly, 70 or 80% of what he uncovered you can fix yourself using just a caulking gun and going around and filling in between the floorboards and the door jambs and under the... everywhere there are little tiny cracks that cold air gets in through. And we were amazed when we finished sealing all of these how much warmer the house was.
It's as if we put a tea cozy on top.
And if you have an old house, it's probably even more important, because this house, as Lucy said, was built in 1984. But our previous house was built in 1905. And it had really a lot of cracks. I mean, if we'd known about this thermographic survey, we could have made a major difference to that house.
This is the sort of thing that his camera showed. It took a picture of where the heat loss was. That very dark line shows that under this wall and around the skirting board there was a big gap and cold air coming up from gaps between the insulation underfloor. It was well worth having done. And it's one of the things that Muswell Hill Sustainability offers to people for a very low cost. It's not quite as professional as this job, but it certainly helps people see where they're losing most of their heat. Anything else?
Then I'll show you around the house. And this is the air coming in from the bathroom, which is already warm. And this is where it sends out the cold air through the roof. So the warm air comes in, it's made much hotter in here, and that happens because this is the opposite of a refrigerator. Instead of taking warm air out, it takes the cold air out and sends the cold air up there. This is the air source heat pump that provides the underfloor heating. And just like in the other one, where the pipe going through the roof, all the cold air was taken out, this is what happens here. If you come out here when this is running, the air coming out here is freezing. So again, it's taking the cold air out and leaving only the hot air, which heats up the water. This is the same sort of tank that we showed you before in our utility room. This contains the hot water. And there's a pipe here and a pipe here. So it pumps in the hot water into the underfloor heating, and then it comes back out. And this senses whether it's still warm enough to go back in again. And if it isn't, it turns on the air source heat pump outside that I just showed you, which tops up the heat, puts it back in here, and then it starts again.
With a boiling water tap, you take your cup with your tea bag or your coffee in it, and you count to 3, 2, 3, and you get boiling water out of it with no waste at all. You can fill up your saucepan to boil your potatoes or beans or whatever, and not have to wait for a kettle to boil in a minute or two. And so it's instantaneous. It's kept again in a highly insulated tank below, and in those 2 or 3 seconds before it comes out boiling, it heats it from 95 to 99 degrees. And we found this invaluable and very good. I believe they also have boiling water taps now that you can have either 95 degrees for some teas that don't, or coffee I think, that shouldn't be done with boiling water, as well as 99 or 100 degrees for things that do require boiling water. So they're quite expensive, these things, but they're certainly worth considering. So the extract fan up there is responsible for all our hot water in the house. It sucks in air from the bathroom, which is usually in most people's houses, I think, kept a bit warmer than the rest of the house. And of course, being above the shower, it tends to be a bit warmer even than elsewhere. It also means that we don't get the mirrors and windows steamed up because it takes all the hot air and steamy air out. The air source heat pump doesn't have to work as hard if the air that it's taking in is already warm. And so the minute you turn on the hot taps for a shower, it gets warmer in there, and so the air source heat pump doesn't have to work as hard. And air is the fuel for this machine, whereas oil and gas are usually the fuel. In this house, they are kept underground where they should be. And at the moment, the government isn't charging us for air, so our fuel for heating all our hot water is free.